Not me, but I was bass fishing and heard a guy yelling for help. I ran toward the sound and found the man wrestling to unhook a 42-inch muskie he caught bank fishing. I had one glove and a pair of pliers which we shared between the two of us. Trying to hold the fish still, I slipped. With one thrash, the man became attached by way of a large crankbait lodged deeply into the pad of his thumb. To the deeply unhappy fish, which continued to flop and absolutely mutilate this guy's thumb. We got the fish unhooked, and the guy was completely adrenalized, snipped off the hook, leaving a big piece under his skin. Despite the situation, he was ecstatic about the fish, biggest he'd ever caught by 20 inches. He asked me to take some pictures. We put the fish back, and he made his way to the emergency room. Tigerfish in Zambia wasn't a huge one like you will see online. The terrifying part was the guy yelling at me to reel it in fast because a hippo was charging us, a surreal sight. While handlining albacore commercially, a mako smashed my tuna, went flying in the air, and pulled me against the waist-high rail. I got the tuna, and it turned into dinner. 5-foot spinner shark that leapt from the water, 6 feet in the air, directly into 15-foot skiff. Shark is going nuts, flopping and wriggling like it was electrified. Nowhere to go to get out of its way. Had to pin him down with an oar and a life jacket. It took both of us to get him back in the water. All this took place in under a minute, though it seemed to go on forever. Bull shark, hooked in brackish water, Pawleys Island, South Carolina, in my kayak. Assumed it was a manta ray because it was so heavy. When that thing breached the water about 10 feet away from my boat, I cut the line and got the heck out of there. Don't know exactly, but looked to be 4 to 5 feet in length. Way too big to try and land on my kayak with my small gaff. I had heard they would swim up into brackish water, but had never seen one. I chummed up a 6-foot freshwater eel that came in and slowly ate my bait, and took my 20-pound mono and Canadian Tire fiberglass rod and destroyed it. Swimming backwards because, well, they can, I went into shock, shaking like a little girl. We were drifting overnight about 100 miles offshore one night, and I put out a hand line we would leave out just for something to play around with while on watch. It was basically a bunch of 500 paracord, 30 feet of 300-pound mono, steel cable, and a bungee cord tied onto the paracord that was tied around a bit. I'd use a peanut buoy as a cork basically, so we would have a visual. This particular night, I used a whole amberjack that was 10 to 12 pounds for bait. Long story short, I walked out on the back deck, and the line was tight as a guitar string, and I couldn't move it. I woke up 2 other guys, and we pulled on it for about 45 minutes and finally got to see it. Now it's 2 a.m. standing on the back deck, which has no railing or anything. Just a 3 to 4 foot drop straight to the water. We had a light shining down overhead into the water. The stern was 15 feet wide for reference. All of a sudden, we saw a giant shadow come up that was longer than the stern was wide. I've caught a lot of big fish, but something about total darkness except the spotlight shining down 100 miles from the closest dry land at 2 a.m. and hardly any noise except a light breeze, and seeing that huge shadow slowly rising up was just spooky. It ended up being a huge hammerhead that was about 16 feet long and 1,000 pounds. We finally got the head up enough to cut the line about 2 feet from the hook. Took my brother to my favorite can't miss fishing hole years ago, and he was getting skunked while I was reeling them in. He hooked a real fighter who was fighting with a ton of excitement and yelled for me to get the net. He was eagerly looking over the side of the boat into the water awaiting a monster bass, and then he screams like a little girl at the sight of a huge snapping turtle on the hook. I laughed so hard, and I still do.